Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So I wanted to say a few words about the passing of two people recently who were very important to me at different stages in my life. And I'll kind of go in chronological order and the time in which I knew them. And I kind of think that when anyone dies, reflections about them really tend not to be about the person themselves only, but they're kind of about the way that that person impacted your life. So so that's kind of what this is. A friend here. um, so anyway. So Fethullah Gulen, I met him when it was an interesting situation. I was in college at American University in Washington, D.C., and by around 1994, I was getting ready to go to Bosnia to join the Bosnian army to volunteer during the war, but I didn't really 100% know how I was going to get there. I had some friends who were refugees, and they had family in Slovenia. So I was going to go to Slovenia to this town there, and then from there make my way to Bosnia. So there were these Turks who went to my school. They were, I don't know, computer science students or something, and a group of them, about 10 of them, and they were part of the MSA. And I used to go to the Musalla there, and I would see them there. So just part of the group of the Muslims there. So they had started inviting me to for tea and hang out with them and different things, which was welcome to me because I didn't really have any I did have some friends up there, but not on campus. I had started meeting people around DC and stuff, but I didn't have a car. It was far from a metro stop, so it was kind of hard to get around. So they were my friends, they're on campus, some of my friends. So they said, well, we have some schools and stuff in Turkey, so if you're going to go to Bosnia, why don't you come to Turkey first and, meet our group, and then you can go to Bosnia from there. So I was like, well, okay, why not? I mean, it was out of my way. I mean, it's very far out of my way, relatively speaking, but I said, okay. So actually, they paid for my ticket to Istanbul, these guys did. And I don't know, I didn't really question it too much because I'd just experienced a lot of generosity from the Muslims, having converted a couple years earlier. And so I landed in Istanbul, and it was my first time being out of the country, and was met by someone from their group, and I still didn't understand really what the group was they were talking about. Thought it was like an organization or something, and as we're, he greeted me, and we're driving through Istanbul, and it was at night, and he's pointing out, he's like, we're driving along the highway, and he's pointing to different signs, and he's saying, that's our business, like billboards, like that are, advertisement stuff. Or we drive by a building and say we own that, or he, different things like that. And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? I mean, it was a little weird or surprising, I guess. And then he started introducing me. He's taking me to different printing presses, a hospital, clinics, businesses. I mean, the whole story of my being introduced to the Hizmet movement or Hizmet Hizmet movement is unusual, but its own different kind of story, which I can go into later. But specifically about Fethullah Gulen. So they had a school, Yamanlar College, that they took me to in Izmir, and showed me around there. And it was they were on break, so you just showed me, like, here's like the kids is like science fair exhibits and things, which was really interesting. But anyway, they're like, okay, you're gonna stay on the top floor here of this building with Hoja Effendi. They kept saying Hoja Effendi, Hoja Effendi. I didn't really know who that was until it turns out it was Fethullah Gulen. So I actually wound up spending, that was Ramadan in '94, spending Ramadan there with him in his apartment. And, you know, obviously he was a busy man and kind of reclusive. So I wasn't there, he wasn't there all the time, you know, with me, but, you know, there was like a masala in the area, I mean, in that top floor. And I had like my own kind of apartment, if you will, or suite. And then like the masala area was used for like salat, obviously, and then also like he would teach his students. He had his top students, I guess, living there or visiting there, whatever they were doing. They would come and they would have a halaqah, you know, regularly every day. Sometimes, you know, more than once a day, and he would teach. And I would sit and listen on the outside. I mean, obviously, I don't speak Turkish. But you know, I recall them studying, interestingly enough, as you read later, you know, that they were studying Sayyid Qutb's Fi Dhilal al-Quran, which is, you know, again, Fi Dhilal, which is interesting, you know. So anyway, but they were Sufis, you know, and so I was kind of like I was very new Muslim, but I, you know, 2 years at that point, but I was mainly in the circle of like Salafis, you know, like IANA, Islamic Assembly of North America, and like Sheikh Jafar Idris and that circle, Salah Sawi. And I was, you know, kind of weirded out by some of the things like they had, like in some of their books, the English translations they had floating around were like, you know, if you're in a jam or something, you can pray to Hamza radiallahu anhu, and Hamza will come down and like help you out in your situation or whatever. So I was like, you know, a little weirded out by that stuff. But anyway, the story of my interaction with them is a long one, and don't want to spend that time here. But I was really moved, I think, by Fethullah Gulen's hospitality. I mean, even then I knew that they were trying to like recruit me for you know, they didn't want me to go to Bosnia. They wanted me to go to Bulgaria and teach English at a school that they had in Bulgaria, which I wasn't really interested in doing. And I also wasn't interested in joining their group because, first of all, I wasn't Sufi, and it just seemed like they had something going on there. Again, like my impressions of the Gulen movement and all that is, you know, is a very long story. You know, even though I was only there for a month, you know, it's a very interesting story. But I want to focus on Fethullah Gulen, the individual and the man. I found him to be very humble and nice, and had a lot of gravitas. I mean, very serious man, actually, very serious. But you know, very nice and very generous, and he gave me actually a lot of money, bought me some nice clothes, and when I left Istanbul for Slovenia, and they were again disappointed that I didn't go with them, you know, to you know, and stick with them, but they gave me a great deal of money, cash actually, which ended up being extremely important to me as I got to Slovenia and then to Bosnia and into the army. Probably had a couple $1,000s, which, as you might know, you know, goes a long way. I mean, especially at the time in you know, in a war-torn country and so on. I mean, I really don't think I could have made that trip without that. And so I ultimately did join the Bosnian army, and the rest is a different story. But anyway, he was important person in my life at the time, you know, and have a lot of respect for him and for what they were doing. Now, I don't know the details of what happened with the coup later and so on. And I have a lot of thoughts on, I was in prison at the time. I have a lot of thoughts on what might have happened, and then what might happen in the aftermath with the clash, and then the ultimate different directions that the AK party, or it was previous to that the Rafa party, as I knew them at the time, which I had a lot of experience with as well, and then the Gulen movement, which I also had a lot of experience with, at least during that period in the early '90s. The second, but last thing I'll say about that is that I learned a lot about and got a very deep impression about one certain type of Islamic organization. A kind of, it was really a quasi Sufi tariqa, also with a kind of like secret society, Muslim Brotherhood type organization. When I say organization, I mean like organization, like institution, but I mean organization in the way it was organized. Witnessed a lot of things like fundraising and operations, the way networks operated. It was just very, very interesting, in how as one type of sort of human organization, and also Islamic networking type of thing. Professionalism, very, very extremely professional in almost everything. But that's Turks generally, so that it was really interesting and made a lot of impressions on me. As for Mahdi Bray, may Allah accept him. I knew him, I knew him from the early '90s as well, and then I only got to really work closely with him after, in something around 2002, 2003, when I became the communications director of the Muslim American Society's headquarters in D.C. Actually, technically, I was the communications director of the Freedom Foundation, which was like their advocacy group, but that was kind of their public face, the Freedom Forum at the time. So I was effectively the communications director for the organization itself, because we were in the same office as the organization's headquarters. It's very decentralized, of course, but and this in Virginia, Northern Virginia, D.C. suburbs. So Mahdi was the executive director of that, and even though I had known him, since the '90s, I was very impressed with him. The man was a really dynamic individual. Very, very hard worker, very committed, and a lot of people know about his activism and about the impact that he made on, on Islamic, work, if you want to put it that way, in the D.C. area. He was instrumental, and for better or for worse, he was instrumental in bringing the far left, like Answer Coalition, and those type of socialist and communist groups into working with, an alliance with Muslim organizations, which I think was, and I had a lot of misgivings about, and I thought was disastrous ultimately in the end, but at the time made a certain kind of logical sense, because, in the context of opposition to the Gulf War, and so on, kind of like, well, yeah, they're communists and they're, they love Milosevic, but at the same time, like, they are bringing like, thousands and thousands of people to these anti-war protests. So it was, you could kind of understand the thinking at the time, because you're trying to save lives, and prevent war. So what do you do? So Mahdi was absolutely instrumental for that. But another thing, just apart from that, and again, we could talk like, I could talk a long, long time about those sort of things, but just Mahdi Bray, the individual and the man, was really a dear friend and mentor to me. He was very loving, loving, kind, took a great deal of interest in me personally, and guiding me. We had dinner or lunch or whatever a few times, and he gave me a lot of really, really good life advice. And also, just reflecting on one incident, but he shared with me that, his time in prison, he had been, he had been in prison for, actually had been affiliated with some black nationalist militant organizations and stuff, which, a lot of his So that was, you know, very formative for him. And he moved past all that, but it still was formative. And then just remembering one incident that happened where we were in Chicago together doing workshops for Masajid, and we were, you know, flying back to DC from Chicago, and we got to the airport, and we were going to the gate, and so this was like 2003, maybe February 2003, and we were met at the gate by at least 25 different law enforcement officials, some mostly plainclothes, some not, some uniformed, some Chicago police, and they said, told me, "You're not getting on this plane," you know, and they wouldn't let Mahdi get on the plane either because he was on the same itinerary with me, and they said, "You're on the no-fly list," and I was like, "Well, I flew here for," I was starting, my teenage, I was 29, you know, my teenage kind of smart alecky, you know, juvenile delinquent type behavior that I had not left behind. You know, I'm like, well, you know, you guys let me on the plane flying out here, you know, how could you let that security breach happen? You know, and I'm mocking them basically because I'm like, you know, if I'm such a dangerous person, why'd you let me on the plane? And Mahdi is going, it's like elbowing me, he's going, shut up, just shut up, you know, and I'm like, okay, you know, I mean, I respect him. And I was like, okay, all right. I immediately like sort of quit the, you know, all the showing off and all that, you know, and all, or I don't know, showing off, but, you know, quit all that attitude, you know, and let him handle the situation. He's like, okay, you got it. All right. Yes, sir. And, you know, I realized, of course, that right there helped me immensely, saved me a lot of trouble later in prison, where I was for 13 and a half years. And generally, you know, like because what is the point of that? Like, you know, where does that get you? It gets you nowhere, you know. Now, as a black man and someone who had done time in prison and had a lot of interaction with authorities and stuff, he knew that is through, no doubt, like painful experience, that's how you got to handle interactions with law enforcement. I mean, it's just be respectful and just get out of the situation, like minimize the interaction, do what you're asked to do, and you know, things, you know, won't get out of hand, because you know, the whole I fought the law and the law won. You're not gonna, in those kind of interactions, you do not have the upper hand, and so there's no benefit in being a smart aleck, you know, or whatever, you know. So so that actually you know, and the last thing I'll mention about that, I just, you know, there was this is, you know, around 2000 or so, I think it was, maybe 2000, when several Muslim and Arab nationalist organizations decided that, you know, they were going to have a demonstration where it was some civil disobedience type thing, where they were going to get themselves arrested, you know, as a kind of direct action. I mean, someone had sent us the, you know, I guess it was the Gramsci or whatever manual, and you know, I definitely, I mean, I was really at that time also very anti-communist and stuff, but I was like, okay, I can kind of see like how some of it was, you know, not applicable, some of it I didn't agree with, but some of it I kind of like, yeah, I see their point, you know what I mean, about just how to handle like sort of demonstrations and things like that, you know. So anyway, I was kind of more junior. I was junior at the time, so I wasn't really like a main organizer of it, but I could, you know, I was kind of like involved in, you know, some of the planning or whatever. And anyway, so Mahdi, they all go out and get her, and there were many people who were like, many of the leaders like, I'm not going to do it. I remember a lot of the discussion was like, so and so doesn't want to do it, so and so does. So it ended up being like Mihad, Awad, and others, you know, who went. And the first time, and it was Mahdi, you know, and the first time they couldn't get arrested. Like the police were just like, it was basically on the Treasury Department, or State Department or something like that, where they went and they were like, it was a big demonstration. And they're like, okay, now we're going to go and we're going to sit down, we're going to refuse to move, and with the purpose of getting arrested. And so like by the way, I have to say there's a lot of courage from some of the brothers who might have had immigration situations or whatever, and women too. There's women later. But anyway, But Mahdi, what I didn't realize at the time, so they all get finally they succeeded in getting arrested, and they arrested everyone. But so Mahdi, everyone is released, and it was our job to go and get everyone from the jails, the DC jail, to get everyone released on bail, and it was just like refusing to move or refusing a lawful order, or some very minor thing. But Mahdi, they didn't release him. They held him. They held him for like a week or more. Why? Because he had a record. I mean, it had been probably decades ago. But the magistrate didn't release him. And he knew that was what was going to happen to him, that he knew he was going to have a hard time. And yet he did that anyway, So, a lot of things, Mahdi, I very much disagree with him on many, many things. And, whether it comes to like sort of ideological things or judgment calls, and with the situation with International Answer, even though I can see his point, but, but the man had a lot of courage, and the man had a lot of drive and a lot of dedication and sincerity, and really appreciate so much like all the advice that he shared to me personally, and the concern that he showed for me and care that he showed for me. So may Allah accept him, and may Allah accept Fethullah Gulen for all their faults and errors and mistakes, and accept them and reward them for the good that they did. And and I personally ask Allah to bless them for the concern that they showed to me as a young man trying to figure out the right thing to do, and how to act and behave, and mature. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك.